So January of 2022, I get a note from my boss, and she basically said, if you don't take the booster, we're going to have to take you off of the schedule. And so I was in this position of like, I don't have a choice. I'm going to lose my job. So I took the booster. Exactly a week later, I woke up and it felt like I was walking on rocks. I made an appointment with my nurse practitioner. And in that time, about 2 weeks later, I woke up and my legs were numb. While I was waiting to see her a couple of months later, about a week before my appointment, I started losing vision in my left eye. And I got my appointment to see the neurologist. He diagnosed me with something called transverse myelitis. He said my spinal cord is basically one long lesion.
And
But
this
he
was
told me,
after, again, this was after the vaccine.
oh yeah, was perfectly healthy before that, no symptoms.
Did she acknowledge at all that it could likely be from the vaccine?
No,
Like,
not at
not
all.
even on the table.
None of the doctors were willing to validate me, or they didn't want to put it in the notes that it could have been related to the vaccine.
So none of them obviously would have filed a VAERS report.
None of them. No, none of them.
For 2 years, you're just getting this continual runaround, basically?
Runaround, complete runaround. Yes, and all I'm doing is declining. There were a lot of times where I wanted to end it. I couldn't imagine continuing on like this. Well, Mom, when you get better, what do you want to do? You want to go to the beach? What do you want to do? And it's hard for me to look at him and have to tell him that Mom's probably not going to get better. It's really tough. It's every day is a challenge the minute I open my eyes.
Welcome to the React 19 podcast, where we bring awareness and support to the COVID-19 vaccine injured and discuss the science, research, and laws that affect all of us. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm Ann Forty, the host of the React 19 podcast, and today my guest is Monica Madera. Monica took her first set of Moderna vaccines back in 2021, and after she had her booster in January of 2022, things began to radically change in her health. And today she is here to tell us about what has happened since that time. So, Monica, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And I should note, Monica, even as we speak, has been having IVIG treatment, which some of you who are injured know well about, and some of you are hoping that maybe you can have that same treatment. But let's start, Monica, at the beginning. Just share with us, what was your life like before your injury, and what prompted you to take the vaccine?
Sure. So before the injury, well, I'm a registered nurse. I was working as a hospice case manager. I loved my job. I loved my life. You know, I'm a single mother, so things have always been a little tough, but I had a good job and I had a good life. You know, I would take the kids every weekend to go do things. We went to the beach a lot. And I was very leery of the vaccine from the very beginning. I mainly took it because at that time, you know, the healthcare workers were mandated. But I remember being very skeptical of it. I was worried that I had just heard a lot of, at that time, there was a couple of doctors that I heard of that had some issues. But, you know, there was a lot of push for us as healthcare workers to get it. And there was a lot of, if you didn't want the vaccine, it became very politicized as well. So there was a lot of push to get it.
Right. So you took your first set in 2021.
Yes.
And any reaction?
So the first shot that I had was in January of 2021. At that time, I thought I was fine, but what I realized later was my eczema had flared, and my eczema hadn't flared in probably like 10 years.
Wow.
I didn't make that connection. The second vaccine I had pushed, you know, you were supposed to get it what was it, 28, 29-day period. But I had pushed it all the way out 6 months because I was so worried
Oh.
about what I was hearing, stories that I was hearing about injuries. And so I pushed it out 6 months. Um, and again, my eczema flared. Again, I didn't make that connection.
And then you took the booster in January of 2022. And then what happened?
So January of 2022, I get a note from my boss, and she basically said, if you don't take the booster, we're going to have to take you off of the schedule. I started looking on Indeed, and on Indeed, there were job postings for registered nurses, but all of the postings were saying that you had to have the COVID vaccine, you had to have the booster. And so I was in this position of like, I don't have a choice. I'm going to lose my job. So I took the booster January 29th, 2022. Exactly a week later, I woke up and it felt like I was walking on rocks. Um, I made an appointment with my nurse practitioner. And in that time, about 2 weeks later, I woke up and my legs were numb. While I was waiting to see her a couple of months later, about a week before my appointment, I started losing vision in my left eye. When I had that appointment with her, I told her everything that was going on. And I said, I'm pretty sure that I was concerned about MS or, something along those lines. And um, at first, she tried to tell me that she thought it was muscle weakness and eye strain. And then when I pushed back, she agreed to send me to the neurologist.
Did she acknowledge at all that it could likely be from the vaccine?
Not at all. No,
Like,
not at
not
all.
even on the table.
Not at all. No. So when I got my appointment to see the neurologist, he diagnosed me with something called transverse myelitis.
Yeah,
And
same
he's,
thing as Joel Walskog, the co-founder of React 19.
yes. And I knew from what I was seeing that that was a possibility. He was not willing to put it in my charts that it was related to the vaccine. But he said, well, he said it's transverse myelitis, but it's probably MS. So you're going to need to start this medication for MS. I started the medication for MS, and in that time frame, I asked for another to see another neurologist. Um, when I started the medication, I actually declined even quicker,
Oh my.
and I started having pain that I never had before in my knees. Um, so I went to see this other neurologist, and he said, well, he said, you have RA. Um, and
Rheumatoid arthritis?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So
And
you've
he
gone
was,
from transverse myelitis to MS to rheumatoid arthritis,
yes.
but not at
And
all related to the vaccine.
right, right. And so he said, well, you have RA based off of what he was seeing in the blood work from the initial appointment that I had. And he said, the thing is, because I do have lesions in my spinal cord, he said my spinal cord is basically one long lesion. Um,
And
but
this
he
was
told me,
after, again, this was after the vaccine.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
um, was perfectly healthy before that, no symptoms. So he said, the thing that's strange to me is he said, your lesions are very fluffy in appearance.
Mm.
And he said, it actually looks like something called acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. And he goes, that was likely triggered by the vaccine. He said, but because you're telling me today that you're feeling worse and you're having pain, then it's MS. So he told me just keep taking this medication for MS. So I did, and I was not I mean, I was not plateauing at all. I know the medications for MS are not supposed to make you feel better, but you're at least supposed to, plateau in your symptoms. And I was getting worse. So I made an appointment. Now, during this time, I was seeing a rheumatologist, and he told me, even though my blood work was showing that I had RA, I had no clinical symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, none.
I can't
Um,
imagine this, the frustration. Just, I mean,
yeah.
I would be in tears. I mean, because how long? I mean, are we talking this is over weeks, over months?
So this was over a year and a half.
All the,
And
so all these appointments you kept going to, and they just kept shuffling. Oh, it's this, it's that, or go see this person.
yes, and I did bring up the vaccine and I said, listen, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just think that there's a connection here because the symptoms started so quickly and I had zero symptoms before. And at that time, none of the doctors were willing to validate me, or they didn't want to put it in the notes that it could have been related to the
So,
vaccine.
so none of them obviously would have filed a VAERS report.
None of them. No, none of them. So I did request to see yet another neurologist. And when I was waiting for that appointment to see that neurologist, because he told me, well, you never had a lumbar puncture, let's do a lumbar puncture. So in the time I was waiting to see that neurologist, I woke up one morning and I had started losing the rest of my vision in my left eye. And my muscles were vibrating, I guess, for lack of a better
Oh
word.
yeah, that's, I hear that all the time. People talk about they feel like, I mean, Bree talks about how she feels like being electrocuted 24/7.
That's exactly what it is. And so I ended up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for at that time, about 3 days. They gave me IV steroids. They did my lumbar puncture. They did my MRI again. And they said, well, there's no new or active lesions on your MRI. Um, they said my lumbar puncture was showing, because they were questioning if I had something called neuromyelitis optica. And because of how quickly I was declining and that I had mostly spinal lesions versus brain lesions. So they redid all those tests, and the lumbar puncture came back high for, well, it came back positive for O bands, and they said my O bands were high. So
O
they said,
bands,
well,
what is that?
um, it's usually so what they told me is that when you have those in your spinal fluid, it's indicative of an ongoing inflammatory
Okay.
process.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but what they didn't tell me, and because I had gone on and read the reports, um, the brain lesions that I have, the radiology report said the brain lesions that I have are not consistent with MS. Um, so they said, well, it does. They said your imaging looks more consistent with neuromyelitis optica, but because of the O bands, because what he told me is in that neuromyelitis optica, you can have O bands, but it's usually less than three. And they said I had 13 of these O bands. So they said, well, it's MS, it has to be MS. And I said, well, what is this pain? What is this vibrating pain? Because I said, this is why I can't walk. And I said, I was walking before this. And they said, well, we think it's your rheumatoid arthritis. That's out of control. You need to get that in control. So when I got out of the hospital, I went back to the rheumatologist and he said, well, you don't have any clinical signs again of RA. So he did start me on something called methotrexate, um, which did not improve any of my symptoms.
So where are
So
we now? Where are we at the end of, okay, if that happened in
this
22,
would be 20 at this point. So this started in 2022. And at this point, the first hospital visit, this was April of 2024.
24.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now
And so for 2 years, you're just getting this continual runaround,
run
basically?
around, complete run around. Yes. And all I'm doing is declining. So at the end of 2023, I told my doctor, I said, I can't, it's getting to the point where I can't even get out of my car. because of the pain and my muscles were so tight. So she put me on state disability and she said, well, let's take you off of work and hopefully they can figure this out. So while I was on the state disability and waiting, well, I was waiting to see the neurologist and then I ended up in the hospital. When I was in the hospitals, when they said that we think your um, RA is out of control and you need to, get that under control. So when I was waiting to see another rheumatologist, because I requested a different doctor, I also requested to see another neurologist. So this is like neurologist number 4 or 5 at this point. And that neurologist that I saw, I had to do a Zoom uh, appointment with him because at this point I was in so much pain I couldn't get in and out of my car anymore. um it hurt to sit in a wheelchair for too long. So during the Zoom appointment he said, well, you have MS, you just need to keep taking this medication for MS. And I said, but why am I losing my vision? Why, if I have relapsing remitting MS, am I continuing to lose my vision on this medication? And he just looked at me, he folded his hands up and he said, I don't know. That's what he said to me. And I'm like, that's not a good enough answer. So
This
I,
just to hear you speaking, I mean, I'm like it's just what I feel inside just for you. I can't imagine having to live through that. I just,
it was horrible because, like I said, I'm a registered nurse and I'm not a doctor by any means, but I was treated like I felt like I was treated like I was just drug seeking, like I was not I was not being heard. And every time I mentioned the vaccine, with the exception of the doctor who said it looked like acute disseminated encephalomyelitis triggered by the vaccine,
but
um,
refuse
they
to put it in the record.
they refused to put it in the record, and there was no, they would just get this like glazed look over in their eye and completely ignore what I had said. And so I requested to see another neurologist. This neurologist finally looked at all of my scans from the very beginning. I told him my whole story. And he said, you know what? He goes, this is a very complicated case. He said, this is really not consistent with MS. He said, he goes, so what he put in my chart was atypical MS, atypical optic neuritis. But he said, I have a feeling that this is related to the vaccine. So in that particular chart, it does say um, that my secondary diagnoses could be COVID demyelination, but he would not put COVID vaccine. He put COVID demyelination. Well, I never got COVID, up until that point. So I
Wait,
request,
wait. So you never got COVID or you got you oh,
I
so you've
never,
never had COVID. You've never had COVID. Okay.
never had COVID to that point. I ended up getting COVID at the end of last year.
Oh, after
Um,
two vaccines and a booster.
yeah, yeah. So during that time, after this doctor told me my case was too complicated, he said, I'm going to refer you to another doctor, another neurologist. So
And
while
we're
I
at
was
the end of
waiting,
24. We're at what? September, October 2020.
um, this this was about August of 2024.
Okay.
So while I was waiting to see that neurologist, this is like neurologist number 6 or 7. Um, I woke up one morning and any little bit of good vision I had left was gone in my left eye. I could not, because at that point I was still able to furniture surf to my bathroom. And this particular morning I woke up, it was actually October 1st. Um, I couldn't. even get up. I couldn't even get up out of bed because the pain, the muscles were vibrating so hard that it felt like my bones were going to break.
Oh,
So my son took me to the local hospital because I didn't think I would make it to the bigger hospital about an hour away from us. And the local hospital, they gave me steroids for about 3 days. Um, the a doctor came in and said, "Well, I'm going to start you on this different medication for your RA." And nothing they were giving me. They were pumping me full of morphine, and I had never had those drugs before in my life. And it wasn't touching the pain. And after 3 days, they said, "Well, there's nothing else we can do." They sent me home. I could barely get into the wheelchair. I was in tears because it hurt so much. And I lied in bed for 2 days, and I told my son, I have to go to the hospital that's about an hour away. So we went to the hospital that was about an hour away. I was crying. I was in so much pain in the emergency room that another patient was flagging down one of the nurses, and he's like, "Can you
wow.
help her?"
Wow.
Um, so I finally get into the triage area for the emergency room, and the doctor there said, "Okay, we're going to repeat all your scans." I told her my whole story. And she comes back and says, "Well, your scans are no new lesions, no active lesions," which I tried to explain to her there hadn't been for 2 years. And she said, sorry, she said, "Well, we're just going to increase your gabapentin and you're going to go home." Now, I couldn't even bend my legs. And I said, "How do you think I'm going to get in my car? How do you think I'm going to go back to my house?" And I begged another doctor to help me. She admitted me. I was in that hospital for about 8 days. Again, they were pumping me full of pain medications. I hadn't told them at this point that I was a nurse. And then, I had asked for IVIG. Their pain specialist had came in to talk to me and said, "I think IVIG might help you." Now, they were consulting the neurologist, the MS specialist, who had folded his hands and looked at me and said, "I don't know why you're losing your vision," right? Like he couldn't be
Right.
bothered with me. So
Right.
they were consulting him, and he kept saying, because I was looking at the notes, he kept saying the IVIG wasn't indicated.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to call the patient advocate and patient relations and explained the whole situation to her. Within 20 minutes of that phone call, I had a whole team of doctors. I was getting labs drawn. They were testing me for something called stiff person syndrome. Um, and the doctor came back and he said, "Oh, so you're a nurse." And it was like, it was sad to me that I had to even say that because I felt like it didn't matter who I
Right.
was or
Right.
what I knew. You should
Right.
treat everybody the same. And when somebody's in agonizing pain and you're just pumping them full of pain medications and not trying to figure out what the root cause of that pain is, it was horrible to me. Um,
And unfortunately, you're what you're talking about has happened to so many of the injured. The exact same story. They're just, oh, it's anything but the vaccine filled with these drugs. Oh, we don't know what to do,
yeah,
whatever. And you're just passed on and passed on and passed on. So
yeah.
here we are. You've been in the hospital for 8 days. You're trying to get the IVIG. What happens?
So they finally agreed to the IVIG after my phone call. They said, "Well, it won't hurt anything."
Right.
So the first day I had it, I felt the muscles relax finally, and I could finally sleep.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
and they came in and they said, "Well, how are you doing?" And I said, "I slept." And the muscles relaxed somewhat. And they said, "Okay, we'll go ahead and continue it, and then we'll send you home." So I finished the IVIG. I went home. Now, since I've been home, so this was about the end of October, November. Since I've been home, I have been receiving the IVIG at home, but I'm still in a lot of pain. The muscle vibrations, they come and go. Um, I still having trouble with my vision. I'm completely legally blind. I should back up and say too, during that time, when when the one particular neurologist told me he didn't know why I was losing my vision, I did request to see a neuro-ophthalmologist. And the neuro-ophthalmologist, when I told him my story, he said, "I'm really sorry. What's happened to you?" He said, "We are seeing a lot of this."
Mm.
Again, he would not put that in the chart, but he did tell me that. And I
It
had
happened to
joined,
my mom. I mean, after her booster, she lost the vision in her good eye,
yeah.
and just other things. Just, not to the extent that you've had, but just incredible pain like la that lasted for months, and she still has
Yeah.
some neuropathy and whatnot. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say the pain is excruciating. It
So
is
you still have that pain,
still have it. It's the worst thing I've ever felt in my life.
and you've lived this way for 3 years?
Well, the pain intensified in November of 2024. So I've always had the pain, but it's at the where it's at now, where I can't walk because it is so intense. That's been since about November of 2024. Um, the best way I can describe it around my abdomen and my ribs is if I was wearing a corset and that corset had rocks in it and somebody was pulling it as tight as they possibly could pull it. On top of the muscles are vibrating. That's just the midsection. Going down to the legs, it's the same thing. Vibrations, the muscles are so tight that I tell my son that it feels like I have a metal pole going through the bottom of my feet through my leg and I can't bend it. And they burn and they're cold at the same time.
How are you how are you getting through each day? I mean, I don't want that to sound crass, but I
Yeah.
just how are you surviving this? How are you getting through?
So, how I'm getting through my day, it's really tough because I can't see, can't watch TV. I can't sit up because of the pain.
And I
I
don't
can't,
know if we mentioned that you had four kids, five kids.
5 kids. Yeah. So, during COVID, my oldest son had moved back in, and um, my second to oldest son was already here with me. And then, of course, I had all the younger kids. So they're all here now. My second to oldest son is now my in-home support service caregiver. Um, but it's tough getting through my day. My second oldest son is taking the younger kids to school. He has to take them to all their appointments. Um, he's had to step in and be mom and my caregiver. And it's tough because I can't sit up, I can't watch TV, I can't get up. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of podcasts, and I do have a therapist and a psychiatrist that I see through, like a Zoom meeting. My therapist has helped me a lot because there were a lot of times where I wanted to end it. I I couldn't imagine continuing on like this. And it's hard for me because my 13-year-olds are autistic.
Oh,
And my son, he's always asking me, "Well, mom, when you get better, what do you want to do? You want to go to the beach? What do you want to do?" And it's hard for me to look at him and have to tell him that mom's probably not going to get better, you know? And it's just tough. It's really tough. It's every day is a challenge the minute I open my eyes. And I always go back to the day, which I know doesn't help, but I always dwell on the day that I got the booster. And I just feel like I really didn't have much of a choice. I'm in California, and to my knowledge, there's no exemptions, religious or personal belief exemptions. You have to get a medical exemption, and
California has been difficult for years and years and years. We used to live in
yeah,
California, but I
yeah,
mean, I know that it's been a constant fight for even before COVID for parents who just maybe had a
yeah,
religious exemption or just didn't want to, and they were
yeah.
just hammering down. So
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say what I don't understand about the medical exemption is you have to get injured first to get the medical exemption. And that makes zero sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wish I would have just, it's hard in California, but I wish I would have, I don't know. I don't know what I could have done, but
I know
it,
you were in the same place as everybody else who
yeah,
is like, okay, I either have to feed my family and and you think in your mind, you think, well, surely it can, nothing bad, they wouldn't let if this were really happening, if anything bad were really
exactly.
happening, or I surely I'll get help. I mean, it, that's
Well,
what everybody thinks.
and the way that the media spins things, I never realized before because the doctor that died, he got that idiopathic thrombocytopenia, and they labeled his death. Well, when he died, they said, "Oh, it had nothing to do with the vaccine," even though his family was like, "He was healthy before the vaccine," and he died within 2 weeks. And the when they put it in the media, they put "healthy" with quotation marks, healthy,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that is, and I never realized how they really spin things to fit their agenda.
It's certainly, I mean, I'm 60, well, I'll be 63 here in a couple weeks. And I remember like years ago, my son was like, Mom, he was in the military for a bit. And he's like, I don't think you just really understand the evil in the world. And I'm like, yeah, I get it now. I get it now. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've all seen things that we never ever imagined possible that our government was capable of. And it's when you think about the fact that they're giving this shot to 6-month-old babies,
Yes, yes.
I,
And I have a friend who said there's no way. She knows somebody who got injured, and one of my coworkers, when I was still able to work at the time, told me she had a stroke the day after her vaccine.
yeah,
Um,
at this point, I think everyone knows or has heard of someone who's had an issue. And then, or you have situations where people who who are having all these medical issues, they don't want to acknowledge that it might be from the vaccine, or the doctor may not want to. So, where there again, where's the help? Where's the treatment? Which is the focus, obviously, of React 19, of just let's get the medical help. If the government's not going to do it, hopefully that'll change with this new administration, at least on the research side.
right.
Then we're going to do it ourselves. And, we just had that Yale study. The Yale study was just put out that Bree and others
Yeah,
were in. And just if our government wants there to be any level of public trust in public health, they
yeah,
need to acknowledge what has happened. Even if people believe, oh, you know, these shots, whatever, saved people,
right.
you still have to acknowledge that it was a problem, and people who are
Yeah,
everyone who's looking around going, oh my gosh, I don't want that happen to me. These people have all been abandoned. These people have all these issues. I'm not going to take a shot. I'm not. You can't continue to do this within public health and expect that there are not going to be serious consequences. But back to
yeah.
you, what is the long-term prognosis here?
Um, you know, I know that I'm very sick. I do sleep a lot. My appetite has declined. I was a hospice case manager the last 5 years of my career before I got sick. And I do feel like the prognosis is not going to be good. I am going to this neurologist at this larger hospital because there is a study or there's a clinical trial right now going on in Berkeley, California, um, for a drug called Pipe 307, and it has the potential to remyelinate damaged nerves.
Oh, wow.
Um, so I'm hoping to get an emergency use of that medication, but other than that, I just don't know. I've heard of things, people using this term like turbo cancers and things like that. I definitely feel like it's an it triggered an autoimmune disease,
Yes,
and it's just like on steroids for lack of a better
right.
example. But yeah.
So how your older kids, how are they, 'cause you said you were a single mom. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously everybody's carrying a lot of responsibility and probably feeling the weight. How are they doing?
um I think the older kids are coping the best they can. My oldest son, he's going to school, and he'll come and check on me, and he'll say, "Well, Mom, you got to give it more time and don't lose hope yet." But it's really hard not to. And my second oldest son, he's my caregiver, and I don't know. I know it's really tough on him. He was just this young kid doing his own thing, and now he's had to be mom and take care of mom. And my daughter, I know it's been really tough on her because her grades have been slipping, and my twins, it's really tough on them. My daughter, they're boy girl twins. They both have autism, and my daughter, she's acting out a lot more. She's had a lot more behaviors. And my son, it's sad because like I said, he often asks me what I want to do when I get better. And he, it's hard for him to accept the fact that I'm probably, this is just how I'm going to be from here on out.
Mm. Do you have any extended family that's close, or how have they reacted to all that you've gone through? Do they believe
Um,
it?
my mom, yeah, my mom she's been going with me now to my doctor's appointments, and she, um, did hear the doctors say that yes, this was likely related to the vaccine, even though they didn't want to put it in the chart. Um, so she's been helpful in, coming over and just trying to help any way she can. Um, I know I have a lot of aunts and uncles who know that I'm sick. Now, I haven't talked to them personally, so I don't know if they know what it is related to, but I know that they would 100%, be there for me and back me up. So far, I haven't had anybody say that they didn't believe me. Um, Although that does happen a lot on social media when you're trying to
Oh,
tell your story.
yeah, yeah. When I interviewed, Bree with her book with Caroline, and when they're talking about how, the government was flying people out. I mean, she was in that study. I mean, our government knew in January of 2021 that there were
Yeah,
thousands of injuries taking place, and they promised Bree and others, "Oh, we'll help you. We'll let the public know what's going on." And they never did. And had they done that, you would have not been in the situation that you've been in. But
yeah,
I had posted that interview, and you get comments like, "Oh, that's BS," or "That's
yeah,
you just
yeah,
it's amazing, that we're still at this spot that there can't be an acknowledgement. And maybe we are because we need those at the highest level of these agencies. We've got a new, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is going to be coming in as the new NIH. I've spoken with him directly. He is well aware of what has taken place. You've got obviously RFK Jr., Marty McCary, David Weldon. We couldn't ask for a better team of people who know
yes,
what's going on. Now, can they hurry up to get to some research
yeah,
where a year from now you might look dramatically different, you know?
yeah.
And yeah, what what have been the biggest lessons you have learned through all of this? Like, what is just like, wow, I've just, yeah.
Well, I think the number one thing, and again, I was in a tough spot because I was mandated as a healthcare worker, but I think always trust your instincts. Definitely always trust your instincts and just perseverance, just keep pushing on because it could have been so easy for me to give up.
Mm,
Um, and I keep pushing for my kids and I keep pushing for the truth, and there's always going to be those people out there that don't believe you, that said that will say what happened to you is not real, but it is real. And I think to just keep pushing.
do you have any advice for caregivers? Um, to those, what has been the most helpful for you, as far as, things that, for you just to get through a day? Is there anything that you would suggest, hey, it's really helpful, for this or for that?
I think being able to vent,
Mm,
being able to talk, and really, well, for me personally, being able to connect to other people that have been injured.
mm,
And as far as the caregivers go, like my son, it's tough because sometimes I try not to dump on him too much, but just being able to talk. And, when this first happened, everybody was kind of like, well, I'm not sure if it was the vaccine. And then my son made a comment the other day, he goes, I'm not getting COVID any more COVID vaccines. Um, so just being, like it said, being able to vent and has been huge for me because there's a lot of days I cry and there's a lot of days that I'm angry. And then there's a lot of days that I have to just remember, well, I'm still here and I still have a chance to fight.
mm. Wow. I I just don't even have words. I commend you for even being able to even having the ability to say those words after all you've been through. And oh, I salute you for your ability to do that. I mean, most people, oh my gosh, people are complaining, whatever, my internet's out or my phone isn't working. And,
Yeah,
all that you have faced and walked
thank
through.
you.
How did you ever connect with React 19?
So I started when I first realized that my injury was from the vaccine. I started looking on Facebook to see what was out there, and I found the COVID-19 injury group. And I joined the group, and then I started seeing things about React 19. So I went on the website and I started looking at things, and then I found React 19 on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then I started reaching out and I would say, hey, how, what do I need to do to get an interview? Or how can I get somebody to talk to me? Because what I was afraid of too was that I would pass away and my story wouldn't be out there. And I know there's so many stories like mine out there, but I, for me personally, I just wanted my truth out there. I didn't want, if
Mm,
something happened to me, for somebody go, oh well, she had MS, and that was the
right,
end of it.
right.
That's not the story.
Wow. You are so right. You are so right. And that is why it's so important for people to get their story out. And that's obviously why React 19 does what it does in any way to get the stories out, to show that these people, that you do exist and that your story is what it is and it's not related, like you said, to MS.
Right.
Um, I really, really hope that you and I can have an interview a year from now, and you're going to be sitting up and you're going to tell me that you're walking, maybe even just around the house and back. I want to hang on to what your son What do you want to do when you get better? And
And
maybe have that goal. And then the next time we do an interview, he's sitting on your lap. I want to
I
hang on
hope
to
so
that. I want to
too.
hang on to that hope. Um,
Me
and
too.
I think, again, I think with some of the new people coming in, and I know how hard Bree and Joel and so many others are working to get research done because we should, with all the technology we have, there should be help for you. You
Yeah.
should be able to walk with your son again, with all of your children. I'm just specific that one. And I really, really hope we can do that. So, is there any final words that you would like to leave with the audience?
The only thing I would like to say, especially to the general public, this isn't a political issue. This
Mm,
is a health issue. Vaccine injuries do happen. They've been happening since the history of vaccines, this very start of them. And just to have some kindness in your heart and
mm,
compassion for people. We've lost that. We've become so divided and so hateful that we've lost sight of the fact that people like me are real and we're suffering every day.
mm. You are so right. You are so right. I will put in the show notes all the places people can connect with you. I think you said you have an X account, Facebook.
Yes.
I'll put all that in the show notes.
Okay.
Monica, thank you so much. Thank you. There you are. You're having your IVIG. The nurse is checking your blood pressure. You are 100% in the midst of this, and I thank you for having the determination and perseverance for saying that this story needs to get out. And I know, I can tell you, I will be praying for you and looking forward to the next time we meet. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you for having me.